Hello, Storm here. This is going to be our Excel report number 2, starting with, of course, our medication half-lives. So while doing this, we learned that a number can be divided an infinite number of times. And an isotope is a place on the graph where the data is undefined. In this scenario, we have a horizontal isotope because our y-axis will never reach 0. And so that's what makes it our isotope. Our trend line equation can be a great help because we can plug any number of hours to find that place on the graph. Finally, being able to calculate the half-life of medication can prevent accidental overdose or help one determine when it is safe to take another dose. So as we see here, we have the number of half-lives in this first column here. Then we have, of course, the half-life, 1, 1/2, 1/4, 1/8. And each fraction represents a half of the fraction before it. This column shows the percent remaining per half-life. Obviously, 1/2 is 50%, a quarter, or 1/4 is a quarter, 25%. This is our half-life of ibuprofen. So we started with 800 milligrams, and the half-life is about 2 hours, 1.9. And so we can see at about 17.1 hours, approximately, we would have 0.15 milligrams of ibuprofen left in our system. And I would wager that the body would just would probably just secrete that low amount at that point. And so you would probably be pretty safe at that point. And so I actually went a different direction on my other two. I chose drugs. I'm a law enforcement officer, so I found it really interesting to find out about the half-life of these drugs that I encounter with people on a regular basis. So hydrocodone has a half-life, we found out, of 4 hours. And the general dosage that I found for street users is about 10 milligrams. And so as you can see here, it has a very small high. When you start taking hydrocodone for the high, it's not going to last for very long. And I actually probably should have ordered methamphetamine and cocaine and hydrocodone in a different order, just to kind of emphasize methamphetamine. So we'll skip methamphetamine here in just a second and go straight to cocaine. So yeah, the half-life is about 4 hours. So after about 36 hours, pretty much all of that 10 milligrams can be out of the system. So we're going to scroll on down here to cocaine. Cocaine has a very small half-life, as we can see here. It is about 1.5. It has, and I averaged the milligram usage to about 7 for cocaine during my research, 7 milligrams. So also here, a very, very short high. After about 3 to 4 hours, 3 to 6 hours, all the cocaine's basically out of your system, and there's no more high associated there. So methamphetamines is an awful drug. Here, our half-life is 10 hours. And the general dosage through my research, I found out, was to be about 30 milligrams. So, the high for methamphetamines can last upwards of 3 days, 96 hours here, until the methamphetamines is basically out of the system, but 42 even, 2 whole days before you're down to just 2 milligrams in your system. And so I found that really interesting. And the reason we deal with people on methamphetamine so much is because once your body goes without sleep for such a large amount of time, then you start having mental breakdowns, you know, hallucinations and things of that nature. So I decided to do my half-life medication on street drugs. So I found that really interesting. All right, so we'll move on to our GMOs for plants, and I'm gonna go down here and read off here. So I believe the data that we reviewed can be trusted. I looked at the bottom of the the Weston Price article, and you can see that the article cites its sources. Clicked on a couple of these sources, and they looked pretty solid. So what correlation is when two sets of data appear to have similarities. As you can see, all these graphs that we have here, such as the number of children with autism, with the acreage of corn and soy. Here we have the GMOs in American plants. You know, and then here we have diagnosis of peritonitis with BT corn and rheumatoid arthritis. All these appear to have a correlation. Now, causation is when we have is when one set of data directly affects another set of data. So if, for instance, our acreage of corn, if there was enough research that backed the idea that the corn that we are ingesting is causing these bowel diseases to increase, then you could call that a causation. But you know, Ms. Benzie said that there is plenty of research, and I didn't really get into that research. I did, however, watch a really interesting movie one time called Food Incorporated. Ms. Benzie, if you haven't seen it, it's an excellent movie. Has lots of good information in it. It was a documentary that was put out several years ago. I think 2008, I believe, is when it came out. So yeah, that was our GMOs in plants. All right, so our impaired driving charts here. So daily live loss here is, you know, in 2014 you have, you know, about 48, 2015, 47, 45, 49, all that. So when looking at this data, the changes between 2018 and 2019 is that the death tolls are increasing. And through the research, we found that one drink can produce a BAC in men. And I said in men because that was the data that I found first. So one drink, which is probably a 1.5 ounce shot or an 8 ounce beer, can produce a BAC of approximately 0.02 and 0.01 or 4. So you can deduce that a person's reaction time is slowed according to this data here. Reaction time in seconds for adults with BAC of 0.08, 2.4, that a person's reaction time is reduced by 0.9 seconds per drink up to 1.2 seconds per drink. And I put 2.4 in here because I didn't do my math right. So 0.9 to 1.2, I think is right. Oh, I put an average of 3 drinks, so my math would have been right. Okay, sorry. In the Venn diagram, we can see that we have 4 separate mind-altering substances. We have alcohol, cannabis, other recreational drugs, which I assume would be meth, cocaine, things of that nature, and medications. So what this data is representing is all the overlaps are accidents where that person had those two substances. For instance, this overlap here, the 18, the 1.6, those 18 people had both cannabis and alcohol in their system. And here you can see the two people that were in those accidents from that survey or study had all these substances in them. And so that's what this Venn diagram is representing. You know, here 128 or 11% of the study had only medications, 26 only other recreational drugs, cannabis 41, 3.7%, alcohol 9.7%. So it looks like medication and alcohol are two most common substances we find in bodies during accidents. And so that's what this Venn diagram is representing. And so I personally believe that driverless cars wouldn't spare as many lives. If you look statistically of everyone who has gotten into a wreck, now I didn't do the research before stating this, but I have done the research in the past. Most people go the majority of their lives without getting into a car accident or having as few as one or two. So if you look at the hours driven for a group of people versus the number of accidents, I believe that data is going to be so low. We're looking at this data as accidents that have occurred. If you look at all the data of persons who have driven X number of hours, who have had X accidents, I believe the outliers would actually be the wrecks. And so I would even surmise that when you put a computer to do a human's job, that computer is going to have malfunctions at the same rate, if not more, than a human operating those vehicles. Now, as far as accidents of people who are intoxicated, a lot of the driverless cars, such as the Teslas in California that they're testing out or have tested out and are getting ready to launch, they've written laws in that state that state you have to be in the frame of mind to take over at a split second because of malfunctions that the car could create, could manifest. And so I would surmise that the driverless cars wouldn't really fix anything. All right, we'll move on to our texting and driving data. So here on the vertical axis we have the percentage of accidents for the certain age groups, and I have my outlier set out already, and yeah, 4.2 is going to be the other one. But when you have an outlier, you can see it can cause the trend line to shift in the opposite direction of where the data is actually going. Check, 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 check. All right, sorry about that. All right, so we see how the outlier here skews our data in such a direction that our trend line shifts up, even though the rest of our data, the trend line should be pointing down. So we'll go ahead and change that back now to our 4.2%. As you can see, you know, it shifts all of our data back up like it's supposed to do. In our age group here, you know, you saw the one dot that went way up here, and it squished our line here, our average line super small. And these outside lines here are our largest points, you know, 9% roughly and 4% roughly. Oh, and it also caused our bell-shaped curve to be just like a huge mound because our data was skewed in that direction. So the data that I read from the family inequality link leads me to believe that there is another reason the accidents are falling. And the reason I say that is because in 1975, I saw on the data that accidents were really high. And there has been a steady decline from 1975 to 2015. Even before cell phones, I believe, you know, we got dedicated texting cell phones probably 2004, 2006. Of course, I was in high school and junior high at that time, so I don't remember the exact age, but the data in that study is showing, even for all age groups, that the accidents were very high back then and have slowly crept down even before cell phones became popular for texting. So that was my interpretation of that data. All right, so the distribution of wealth chart that we have here. The distribution of wealth shows that 1% of the population has approximately 35% of the wealth. This here is our data. 1%, 35%, 4% of the population, 27%, 5%, 13%, 10%, 12%. And then 40% of the United States population gets about 1% of the world's wealth. And that just seems insane to me. And I'm going to get on a political soapbox here for just a second. And I believe that it's got to do with our educational spending. You see here that, well, let's see here. I believe this 2% that's covered up is actually our education budget, but I couldn't figure out how to, I guess we can move it here. Oh, okay, I didn't. Well, that's neat. Learn something new every day. All right, sweet. Okay, so yeah, our education budget is super low in the United States, and it's extremely frustrating because I believe that education is the key to success. And I don't mean you got to go to college. I mean, get out there, educate yourself, read a book. I don't have a college degree, and I'm, you know, making far more than either one of my parents has ever made. However, I do want to make a little bit more money, so I'm continuing my education. So the average household income is not normally distributed because there is such a large number of families, 40%, whose income is so much lower than basically the rest of the United States. Even us, and then the next, you know, even the next 10, 20% here, we get 8% less money than that. So, you know, that income is skewing our data pretty heavily. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about our state spending here, our federal spending. So like I touched on a little second ago, that our education budget is so small, and I wish we could funnel more into that, and not just education, but or college rather, but like trade schools and things of that nature. Because when you train people to do a job that they can get paid more for, give them value, then you see overall a decrease in crime, a better, more money going into the economy because we have more people making money, so they have more money to spend, things of that nature. Medicare, Medicaid gets 26%, defense gets 16%. And it's interesting, I'm going to talk about defense here a little bit because I've researched this a little bit. If you take the top, I believe the data I read, top 15 countries' military budgets, add them all up, and the United States still has more spent money on our budget than all the next following 15 countries combined. If you combined the next 15 countries' budgets, add them together, they would still not be as much as the United States spend on defense. Our VA benefits, I believe, are excruciatingly low. Transport and infrastructure, I believe, is super low. And if we did not have a tax system, we as a country could not progress. So if we didn't have this 2% going to transport and infrastructure, then our highways and our interstates would cease to exist in a matter of 10 to 15 years. And then people who are working, who drive, say, from Benton to Little Rock, couldn't make it to Little Rock to work. And so basically people would just be stranded at the house. Our science research, if we didn't have this research to try to further, polio would still be around if we didn't have these science budgets in to help cure these diseases. Things of that nature. All right, we'll move on to our taxes here. Oh, you wanted to see some, I don't think there were any. Yeah, I don't think there were any formulas you wanted to see, except maybe here in the GMOs. Oh, no, here in the texting and driving. Yeah. So check in here, let you see our formulas that were placed in here. All right, now move on to taxes. Okay, so here are head of household. If you make $50,000, that puts us in our tax bracket of 12%, plus our state of 6.9%, and then our $1,360 automatic payment plus our 2% taxes equals $10,810, leaving us with $39,000. So our new pay, if we got a $2,000 raise, actually bumps us up in the next tax bracket, decreasing the amount of income that we make. But it's interesting. I wanted to talk about this a little bit. Most companies that you work for have pre-tax contributions that they pay in with you. So if, say, you're paying in 10% and they're paying in 5%, it would probably be worth it to go ahead and take the raise, because they're putting in money into that retirement taxed at $52,000 instead of $50,000. So when you get ready to retire, you will have more money in your retirement than if you hadn't have taken the raise. So I just would like to put that in there. I mean, it's not something that you entered into the assignment, but I thought it was worth talking about. So getting a raise obviously is not always worth it because of moving
bracket, and it can actually cause a net loss in income. And then by using the charts, you can compare old income to new income with tax brackets to determine if tax brackets, if getting a raise is worth it. But again, like I said, if you know your company's retirement policies, if it's pre-tax, definitely take the raise, because it's going to increase the percentage that they're putting into your retirement. Thus, you'll have more money in your retirement 401k or whatever it is that you use when you get ready to retire. So think of it as saving, not losing money, but saving money. So I also went ahead and did our formula here for a single paying it at 500,000. And so here the tax rate's 35% with 69, and then you have to pay in 45. Let's see, escape out of this. You have to pay in 46,628.50 initially, but your leftover is 243,000. Excuse me. But this is also something I want to talk about, because I read a study that said at about $75,000 for personal income, anything over that is just extra money. That, it doesn't increase your happiness once you hit that threshold. Any money over that amount will not buy you anything that will make you any happier, because you can live with most everything you could think of wanting at 75,000. And I don't know if that's income or gross. I would assume it's gross. I don't remember exactly what the study was going by. Could be net. Now that I think about it, $75,000 net. It's a lot different than 30% of 75,000. But even at my pay right now at 35,000, thinking if I, brought home 35,000, I wouldn't know what to do with the extra money. I'm sure I could spend it, but just found that little bit of that article interesting. Even though they're getting 50% of their money taken in taxes, I still think that's completely reasonable. Nobody's going to spend $243,000 a year unless they're just buying stuff they don't need, or increasing their standard of living to a point where they're living at their means, which I don't think is ever smart, because you never know what could happen. You could lose your job, your company could be shut down, and here you are with a $300,000 house and a house note of $2,000 a month that you can't pay for anymore. So that was my take on the head of households. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.